stated, this is, of course, the second student webinar series, and we're going to be presenting on the topic of Big Stories, Bold Voices, Activism Redefined, which is a workshop that we both were able to create to help you identify your story as you begin your activism journey. And so she already shared, but my name is Aigne Taylor. And I am
Iyana Beachem.
Yes. Moving right along. So Leslie did a great job introducing ourselves, but Iyana, do you have anything else that you want to share before we begin, or?
Not much. Leslie kind of covered most of it. Thank you for that. And thank you for everyone's patience because the technical difficulties were being difficult today. So we're glad to be here.
Thanks for having you. Moving right along. I also don't have nothing else to add. Yes, but to get right into an overview of our presentation, we are of course going to have an icebreaker to break the ice in this space. Also going over the purpose and the learning objectives of our workshop. We're going to define activism and also define storytelling, and then we're going to kind of share with you all how they both intersect and correlate. And then we're going to have an interactive activity, and then we're going to share a takeaway with you all that is full of resources. And then we're going to, of course, have some space provided for any questions or any additional feedback. And then we're going to share that toolkit with you all and then close it out. So nothing too long or strenuous, but I do hope that you all will engage with us throughout the duration of the workshop. And also feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We are going to have a space provided for that, but I don't want anyone to lose their question when that space does come. So feel free to ask it in the chat, and then we can address it when the space is provided at the end. So to get us started with our icebreaker, the question is going to be, so who is your favorite unsung activist and why? And so by unsung, essentially we meant not every activist had this huge platform where they were elevated, such as, for example, maybe Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King Jr., individuals you often hear about. But we do want to make sure that everybody, of course, receives their flowers. So if y'all have an activist or even, somebody local in your community that is doing the work, but you feel like, maybe they deserve, more recognition, feel free to share who that individual is and why. It can be very brief, 1 or 2 sentences, or even a few words, but we do want to, of course, give space for you all to chime in. And you can come off mute or feel free to raise your hand.
Hi, Aigne. Thank you for sharing this. Interesting question. I'll say the first person that actually came to my mind was Lauryn Hill. And I don't know, I just kind of thought about how in some of her music, she does critique the social ills. So yeah, I don't know. That was just the first person who came to mind when I saw this question.
Okay, definitely love Lauryn Hill. So thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Again, y'all can just come off mute and popcorn in. Anybody else?
Hey,
Okay.
Aigne. Hey, Iyana.
Hi.
I love this question, and I love that you opened it up to local things too. So again, I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, and Miss Bertha Todd, who's really well known here in Wilmington, but has just been instrumental in my local community as an educator and a civil rights advocate and a storyteller. Really has been just played a huge role in helping make sure that Wilmington's history, which is very complicated and is being discussed and is still a part of, our current framework, and just making sure that folks know about that and helping our community move forward together.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. Anybody else? I'm gonna hop in before we move forward. All right, well, we can move forward. Hope you all enjoyed the icebreaker question. Of course, thank you for those who were able to share and engage. Iyana, if you want to go over the purpose.
Of course. So the purpose of our presentation is to strengthen the undergraduate student understanding of storytelling and how it impacts their everyday lives through activism. In every part of history, there are a plethora of renowned activists that fuel their passion through their lived experiences. We tend to empower students to have the courage and confidence to tell their stories, to uplift issues that impact individuals and communities around them. We also want to redefine activism as something that is more digestible and relatable. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Then moving right along. So our objectives and of course our goals of this workshop is to really encourage you all to have the ability moving forward to be able to reflect on your lived experiences and also how they can actually contribute to, one's drive or motivation in being an activist and creating societal change. Also understanding the importance of an activist mindset. And so knowing that activism is not a one size fits all, like everybody's activism is going to look differently. And that's the beauty of it. And also, we want to help you all develop leadership skills that can contribute to one's journey as an activist. So for example, storytelling, obviously being a key skill, creativity and communication, and also marketing skills, to name a few. And moving right along, I will go ahead and define activism. But first, I do want to open the space to kind of know, like, how do you all define activism? And so in knowing how you define it, would you all say that you're an activist based off of that definition? And this doesn't have to be nothing too long or drawn out. It can be a synonym. It can really be anything. But what comes to mind when you think about activism? And do you think that you align with that based off your personal definition? Don't all chime in at once. And feel free to also share in the chat if you're not in a space where you can come off of mute. Definitely want to give space to that.
Okay, so Ellie, I hope I'm saying that correctly, says that when they think about activism, they think about advocacy.
Absolutely.
So those terms are really used interchangeably because they go together. So understandable.
Definitely. Anybody else want to give way in the chat or come off mute before moving forward? And sharing the definition of it.
And Anna said, working collectively to identify and address needs.
Okay.
This is Leslie, and I'll say, I think when I was growing up, for me, activism always meant in the front. Right? It meant like, I'm the one protesting, I'm the one with the bullhorn, I'm the one sort of leading the march. And as I've matured and just as I've witnessed real change, I realized that it's all of, it's everybody working together. It's solidarity, right? It's collectivism. It's when we make a decision together that we want to change something in the world and we take action on it. And so it's, I guess it no longer for me has to be like the loudest voice or like the strongest person in front. It's all of us.
I love that you shared that. And so just moving on, while there are, of course, a plethora of definitions, as we saw, like, from everybody that shared, to define activism, essentially, it's the ability to take action against or for political and social change. And so from activism, you have so many other isms that can essentially, be your framework and ground you in your activism journey. So maybe conservatism or liberalism or radicalism or even feminism. So all of these things are going to, branch off of your activism and can really guide you along your activism journey. And so political and social change are, of course, very, very broad because you also have economic change, you have change as it pertains to healthcare and all these different things that, again, through your activism. And just echoing what Ms. Leslie said, that like activism looks differently for everybody. I know throughout history, we do highlight the people who, led the marches on the forefront and people who had the bullhorn and who led the marches and all these big speeches. But the people behind the scenes also matter just as much. So maybe your journey is, maybe you do want to be on the forefront and spearheading the march, or maybe you like to do the behind the scenes, make sure there's water at the march, or actually maybe you want to lead social media campaigns, or maybe you want to be somebody's campaign manager running for a political position. So activism is not a one size fits all, like we said in our objectives, but it is something that we all can come together as a collective and again aid in this sort of change that we all are eagerly trying to seek. So that is essentially how we define activism.
Okay, so now we're talking about storytelling. So my question for you all, of course, we're going to define it as Aigne did, but my question for you all is, what qualifies as a good story? And do you think that you have any good stories that are worth telling? You can answer in the chat or unmute. Island's cool.
Hey y'all, it's Anna. I think what qualifies as a good story is one that's relatable. Folks can see themselves in the story, or it helps folks to feel empathy. They feel a part of it, a part of the story.
And then Ellie, that was a great response. Okay, and then Ellie said, a good story makes the audience feel something. It helps the audience see themselves in others. Like Anna said, relatability. And then Desiree, I believe I'm saying that correctly. Good stories have vivid details. That's a great input. I don't think we have any other responses. I do like the ones we've gotten so far. I just want to make sure I'm not skipping over anybody. There we go. Okay, so storytelling is the art of relaying a message to someone else from something you've experienced or witnessed. So essentially, after going through an experience, every experience will allow you to have a story, whether it's big or small. And that comes from something like, how was your day? When you tell someone how your day went, you're telling them a story of your day. And when someone asks you, say a time that you felt uncomfortable in a police confrontation, or you felt wronged by your political system. When you relay that information, you're telling a story about your experience. And it's in the crossover between activism and storytelling to where activists are born. Because once you recognize that your experiences are a part of your story and other people have similar stories, you can then begin to advocate for the changes necessary to make sure that that story is either improved or doesn't happen to anyone else. Oh, so I'll keep going on this one. So now we're going to give you some examples about activism and storytelling throughout history, and then we'll get a little personal and tell you our personal stories too that led to our individual activism. So for me, what fuels my journey as an activist is wanting to provide relief and solutions to those who experience injustice. I grew up in a very different environment than the one I live in currently, and seeing the drastic differences between the resources that people have now and the levels of education and the understanding of what seems to be basic knowledge about taxes, finances, justice, what their rights are concerning voting or housing is very disturbing to me. And because of that, I always pride myself or prioritize being able to go out and advocate on behalf of the people who can't. Wanting to see my community take charge of their story and their voice. I believe that everyone has a voice that deserves to be heard. Everyone has a story that matters, and that collectively change can be made once those voices and those stories come together. Seeing the impact of the changes we have made in the numbers of issues left. So I always like to give reverence and notice to the, my goodness, uncountable amount of activists who have fought for us to have the leaps and bounds that allowed us to be here now. That is a very big deal. A lot of legislation, a lot of lives lost. However, there is still room to grow. And I feel like because of, let's say, the foundation of a lot of the systems that we are operating within and trying to change, there will always be something that needs to be fixed. So seeing that progress and seeing what could be makes me want to continue my journey as an activist. Now, two of my favorite historical examples are Claudette Colvin. She was a teenage mother of a darker complexion, which mattered back in, I want to say it was 1950, 1960 time frame. And she had started or was one of the participants in the bus boycott. And then from there, Rosa Parks came in. However, because of the narrative at that time, Rosa Parks was more educated. She was a light-skinned woman, married, goes to church. You know what I'm saying? She was easier to market. Her story was pushed, and Claudette Colvin was kind of like buried underneath. And a lot of that happens to a lot of stories, but it does not make her contribution any less worthwhile. And then also John Lewis, big fan of John Lewis, especially when he gave his speech on Bloody Sunday and he talks about causing good trouble. John Lewis was very passionate about his activism work, but he resided underground a lot. So even though he led plenty movements, he led marches on Bloody Sunday, he was big about reparations and desegregation, he lies underneath the major narratives that we see in history. So those are my two favorite examples.
Yes, and so going into my personal journey about what fuels me as an activist is I'm understanding the historical context of medical racism. So I'm interested and passionate about doing research on healthcare disparities and shedding light on how African American, but especially Black women, are oftentimes looked over in the healthcare system. And so again, understanding like the historical context of how our healthcare systems in America are inherently racist and also have implicit racial bias, which really increases the likelihood of Black women, again, dying in hospitals, is what really fuels me, because I know that like this is a huge like public health issue and not enough stuff is being done about it. So understanding how far, yes, we have come, but how much further we do have to go does motivate me to keep going and advocate against medical racism. But also hearing firsthand the experiences of my loved ones about their interactions with healthcare providers. So I'm also from I'm from a lower income area in North Carolina. So I would definitely say like we don't have top tier like quality of healthcare, especially with me being, again, low income, and I'm also a Black woman. So that in itself is already a double minority experience right there. So just hearing firsthand how like my grandmother experienced racism from her nurse when it came to understanding like she actually was in pain, but it kind of was just brushed under the rug for like, you know, a huge amount of time to where like my grandmother literally could have lost her life while having literally 4 of her kids. And so just knowing like firsthand how like you hear about these stories and like it seems so like far in the distance from you, but like you realize like, you know, people every day who look like you are going through these things that you see on the news, going viral and things of that nature. So just understanding those firsthand experiences and how this really is a present issue. It isn't something that just comes around every so often, but every day Black women are being, again, just antagonized by the healthcare system. And that's a really huge healthcare issue. And then also my eagerness to make the lives of those around me easier, safer, and happier. So I'm just a person who loves to just help people and really see the good in everything. So just knowing that like I want to make people's like lives easier. Like we already live in a capitalistic culture and life is very stressful for all of us, man, woman, or even non-binary folks. Like it's a very hard time out here for all of us. So if I could aid in making somebody's life easier, then I feel like I did my role. And so some historical examples that not necessarily that I enjoy, but that, you know, do shed light on their also journey as activists is going to be Emmett Till's mother. And so I'm sure most of you all know the case of Emmett Till, how he was killed by some white men after whistling at a white woman in Mississippi. I want to say the 1950s this took place after he was going to Mississippi to visit some family members because he actually lived in Illinois, which of course was very different, you know, back in the day up north versus down south. And so he, again, was murdered and, you know, was put in the ocean. He was not supposed to be found. But once they did find his body, his mother did ask to have an open casket because she wanted everybody in the community, Black or white, to see what had happened to her son. And so from her personal experience with obviously police brutality and losing somebody so close to her like her son to it, she was really able to like shed light on how this impacts like so many different people. And so with that, she was able to be an active role in like the NAACP in Chicago. And she was also able to just really do speaking engagements and speak and shed light on how like this is a huge issue. And like African Americans can't continue to go on being killed because of things like this. And then next we have Dr. Amuta Onukega, I believe that's how you say her name. But she is a Black woman who actually experienced firsthand medical racism when also going into labor. She did not receive the quality of healthcare that she really should have received at all. It was very much so lackluster. And she also lost one of her best friends growing up to a lack of quality healthcare when she was suffering from the autoimmune disease lupus. And so from that, she became very passionate about combating healthcare disparities, but more specifically maternal mortality and how that disproportionately impacts African-American women, because Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy complications compared to our white counterparts, unfortunately. And so I have a link later on in the resource toolkit, but it's a TED Talk that she's speaking about her own personal journey and how it inspired her she started her own research lab. And so it is the Center of Black Maternal Health and Reproductive Justice. And she's also a professor of Black maternal health and associate professor in public health at Tufts University. So again, her going through this firsthand, but also seeing her loved ones, like her best friend, lose her life to different things in healthcare, really inspired her to keep striving forward and again, making her impact known in this field. So now we have our interactive activities. So we do want to, of course, know more about your stories and everything. So we have a Jamboard that I will share immediately following this slide that you all can, of course, add a text bubble and engage and really just develop some points about your story and how maybe it has inspired your activism journey, or maybe now knowing that how they do correlate, maybe, you're able to now use your story and allow it to motivate you moving forward. And so I have just a few kind of questions that you can think about when trying to tell your story. So take the time to really think about what motivates you to advocate, what inspires you to do this kind of work. What is your end goal? So is it policy change? Is it abolition? Is it, I don't know, just doing research of some sort? So really think about your end goal. And of course, you may not have it right now. But, just kind of thinking about what is it that you're looking to do in this field of activism? And how do you intend to impact the lives around you? And then also, do you align with a particular framework? And this is just something to help you. Maybe you're, again, conservative or more liberal or more radical. So maybe you ground yourself in doing that kind of work. So, if you align with a particular framework, how can that assist you? So it has been about 5.5 minutes. So of course, keep adding on to the Jamboard. But do the sake of time, I do want to keep us going. So if we could have 2 to 3 people possibly share what they were able to put on the Jamboard, or what were you thinking about, and just thinking about telling your story and allowing it to motivate you as an activist. So feel free to come off mute or drop it in the chat, but I am looking for at least 2 to 3 people to share. Anybody willing to share? At least one person? No. I promise it's a safe space, I promise. All right. Well, definitely won't force anybody, but of course, if you do. Oh, somebody coming off mute?
No, that was me. I was gonna say we won't force anyone, but we'll read a few off. Just one or two.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because these are kind of good. I like these. I'm gonna start with. They're all really good though. What's this one? Yeah. Oh, I like this one a lot. I am motivated by reflection, learning, agency, and people/community power. My end goal is working within and beyond systems and institutions for meaningful change. I like that one a lot. Oh, and this one too. I relate to this one. I'm inspired by the women in my family who also advocate for others. Me too. The matriarchs definitely lit a fire under me.
Definitely. We can move forward. Thank you all so much who were able to contribute to the Jamboard. And you do have access for it. So if you do ever want to go back to it and add on to it, you know, feel free to do that as well. So just moving forward. So we are close to wrapping up. So we do want to just recap our objectives a little bit, and then we'll get some feedback from you all as well. So again, just having the ability to reflect on your lived experiences and how they contribute to your drive to create societal change, understanding the importance of having an activist-driven mindset, and then also being able to effectively tell your story and be creative and think outside of the box, communicate effectively, and then of course, some marketing skills as well. So we do want to ask, were y'all able to learn anything? Feel free to share in the chat or come off mute. I promise y'all it's a safe space. So do feel comfortable to share if you're able to. But if not, do drop it in the chat. We would love this feedback, whether it's, you know, constructive or maybe more so positive. Do share anything, feedback, or if you learned anything.
I appreciated how you all defined activism in a more expansive way, because I've definitely mostly thought about it in terms of like protests and in terms of those forms. So I appreciated highlighting the other ways people are activists. So thanks for that.
Definitely. There's room for everybody in the movement. Like there's room for everybody. Everybody can't be on the forefront.
Definitely. And there's so many different roles and things, because I think a lot of times people think that everything's been talked about already. There's so many different unique experiences. There's always something to fight or advocate for.
Exactly. So just tell your story. I'm sure you will always gravitate towards those people who, of course, will, you know, be able to relate to your story and also be a part of the change that you want to create too. Does anybody else want to chime in and share what you were able to learn or something that stuck out to you throughout the presentation?
Yeah, I was going to say, I love this, this question about sort of what in your experience has sort of given you the skills and the motivation. Because I was looking at the person who put, they had this experience where I guess their mother had to really advocate for them for their asthma diagnosis. And I think we forget that those very, very personal, you know, I've been through this. I know that other people are probably having something similar and making a decision that like you want to ensure that other people don't go through the same thing. I think we forget that that is a motivation, not just for activism, but for real change, because you can speak, you know, to the fact that you know how the system works or you know what you were up against, but that you did find a way forward. And so other people are motivated by that. So I love this idea of recognizing where in your story you have something that could motivate you to create change.
Absolutely.
Yes, I have something I would like to say.
Yeah,
so I really love reading and I love the idea of storytelling, but I had never connected the two together of the art of storytelling and how that connects with activism. So that was really important to me and something that I found very helpful and enlightening and also very empowering, because I love just when people tell their stories. I'm always very engaged and I like writing as well. So that was very informative for me. I really appreciated you discussing and going in depth about that.
Yes, I'm so happy you enjoyed it, because it's really, really so important. Like, again, you'll realize, like, just researching like your favorite activists, big or small, like they had something that they went through, whether it was directly or indirectly, that really inspired them to spearhead whatever type of change that they're trying to seek. So storytelling is very, very important and also helps you be more relatable. And I find that once somebody can relate to you, it's more likely that they'll open up to you as well and, like, you know, be a part of that movement that you're trying to create. So tell your story.
And I will say, your storytelling doesn't always have to be, I know we talked about working behind the scenes, but excuse the background noise, but I know we talked about working behind the scenes because you don't always have to be in the public face, but sometimes you don't even have to leave your own home. Advocacy within the family is some of the most impactful activism that you will probably experience, because not changing, but enlightening the perspective of maybe your grandparents or your parents or your sisters or your brothers so that they may live better or have access to something new. That is just as big as a win as helping put on a protest or putting together a town hall, or like activism and storytelling, because of how inclusive it is and how broadband it is, it really does apply to everybody. It just depends on where your heart's at and where you feel called to lead or make a change in. So yeah.
I love that. Heavy on the advocacy in the family, because you realize, and at least for myself coming home, like my family would really just not know certain things were going on. And so I felt like, you know, with me being in school and really being able to research all these type of things, like what better way to not go back home and kind of spread the knowledge that I'm learning, so that, you know, they can also be able to create change back in my hometown. So definitely tell your stories wherever you go, whether it's big or small, very detailed or not detailed. Your story does have impact. And so we'll move along, but of course, feel free to drop in the chat if you learned anything else. I want to shed light. So this is a comprehensive list of different resources that we thought would be kind of helpful to help you all, you know, again, keep connecting storytelling and activism. And so on it, we have like TED Talks, we have like different articles to read about how to tell your story and how it can, you know, fuel your motivation. I mean, be your motivation for your activism. So it's all different types of things up there. So definitely check it out. Let me know if you scan it and for some reason it's not popping up, but you should have access to kind of click the underlying text and the link should take you directly to it. But everything is linked on that toolkit. So definitely feel free to look at it. I hope it does inspire you all, or I hope more than anything that it is resourceful and helpful. And I'll get with Miss Leslie to see if we can, you know, get it sent out to all of you all directly to, if for some reason, you know, you weren't able to access it. But we do want you all to, you know, enjoy it, take a look at it. And then I didn't see any questions in the chat, but do you all have any questions for Iyana and myself, or anything that you want to shed light on lastly?
I put my Insta. I'm putting our contact info in the chat as y'all ask your final questions or remarks, just in case they come up later. I try to answer my phone, but please feel free to reach out if they don't have any now and they come up later. Yeah,
but definitely feel free to ask any questions during this time. It could be big or small question, maybe even about our personal journeys as activists at the collegiate level. I know I'm an alumna now, so I'm still able to be an activist in my back home community, but definitely feel free to ask any questions.
How have you all gotten involved in activism on your campuses?
Okay, I can go ahead and tackle this really quickly. So I know, again, I studied political science as my first major in undergrad. And so being a sophomore, I was able to see firsthand, and she's another alum, Vashti Hinton-Smith. She works with Common Cause with her HBCU organizing team. And so she was planning a press conference. And so at the time, like I knew what gerrymandering was, but like not to the extent that like how it impacted me directly as a college student. And so at the time, A&T was gerrymandered, so we were split into two different GOP districts, of course, with us being a predominantly for one Black institution, but also we do vote more liberal and more Democratic. So now that we're represented by two GOP or Republican individuals, that definitely isn't fair to us as a campus. And we're also like a super huge voting block. And so Vashti was hosting this press conference on, you know, gerrymandering, how we're being impacted by it. It was students some of my classmates were actually able to speak, you know, at the press conference, and some of my professors as well. And so I was able to really just directly learn about, like, this is so important, and you know, more people need to know about this. So from that, I was able to help other students create a petition to kind of get signed and kind of see like, okay, this is obviously a pressing issue for our students. And so from that, we were able to attend city council and board of election meetings. Like literally whenever they had a meeting, we would attend and get on the agenda to speak. And so from that, that kind of inspired me to kind of, you know, be a voting rights activist in a sense and kind of really advocate for youth voter engagement. And so from that moment, that was fall 2019, my sophomore year, I've been able to do different types of things around voter engagement and civic engagement. So that really kind of sparked that personal journey. But again, my medical racism and that passion kind of was developed from like my own personal experience with medical racism and knowing the history of it.
Okay. And then for me, how did I get involved on campus? So my story is a little different. I went to early college. So I've been at Fayetteville State for a very long time. We have grown up together. And it was my first ever activism on campus was I advocated for student retention I recognized there was a lot of gaps that was leaving almost half of our freshman population basically in the dust, and just kept falling through the cracks. So I was able to work with a couple of faculty and staff members to make sure that we were able to, we put together a project, we pulled all the numbers, and I was able to present my project in front of my provost, my chancellor, the director, the president of student affairs, it's just a group of people. And from there, they were able to change orientation and then the freshman requirements so that students would have more accountability and they would have more support during that transition between high school and college. And that being my first formal act of activism on my campus kind of kickstarted everything else. In the fall, I did a couple of rallies with the NAACP, working with civic influencers was very helpful. I interned at First Focus on Children in DC, and I did federal level child advocacy, which was an interesting experience to say the least. But it just started out with me going to a faculty member, and he was like, "Hey, do you know that early college students aren't included in X, Y, and Z? And this is what our graduation rate looks like now." To digging into that question, not being afraid of what I'm finding. That's very important because it can be overwhelming. So don't be afraid of what you're finding, and then speaking out on what you found.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
What advice would you give to someone who is kind of young or kind of just starting in their activism?
That's a really good question. What would I have told? Okay. First, I would say, sounds very radical, but don't take no as an answer. And I say that because I feel like through activism, you're gonna run into so many no's, but allow that to force you to kind of find another avenue to seek, to kind of, create that change that you want to see. I'm pretty sure the change that's been created so far was not a yes for really anybody, you know what I'm saying? So I don't want you to take a no and feel so defeated that you can't move forward. So take that no as okay, that was one closed door, but so many more can open for you to be able to create that change that you do want to seek. And my second advice would be to get some rest. And I know we have this whole new trend of self-care and self-love, and I love that it's trendy now, and I love that people are starting to prioritize themselves, but really take rest. And so I say that because this movement, I know I'm a very passionate individual. So I found myself once I kind of discovered this passion, I was doing so much with it, whether it was actual positions on campus, whether it was active in the community to a certain extent, joining organizations. I found myself to kind of my whole world was voting rights and civic engagement. And so while I was thankful for it because I was passionate about it, I lost myself in it because I was truly burnt out. I was doing too much of everything while again, also being a student and also just trying to, navigate life and everything, especially during the pandemic. So I would say get some rest, that rally or that meeting that's happening at 8 p.m. because nobody's free during the day. You can miss that meeting to get some rest because the movement is not going anywhere, unfortunately, and the movement is going to need you. And you can't contribute to the movement the way you want to if you aren't your whole self. And so I'm still learning that now, but say no, set those boundaries because you don't want to get so burnt out to where you're out of the movement for 4 years. And now it's so I would just say, get some rest, get some actual holistic self-care, go on that walk. Make sure you're eating. That's a common thing for young student leaders and just activists, where we're not eating or we're eating some snacks at 2 a.m. and then something very simple at noon or something. So make sure you're feeding into yourself so you can pour out all the amazing things you have to contribute. So I would just say, don't take no as an answer, find another way to get it done, and also get some rest. Is definitely what I would share.
That's basically what Aigne said. No, because we had the same experience, especially like I said, I worked in child policy and it was federal level policy. And when I tell you I threw myself in it, it was just bills and arguments and house, it was all the time. There was times you just had to lay on the floor and just be like, what are you doing? What's going on here? So you definitely set that hard boundary. The movement will always be there. And how you're doing effective leadership is when you are able to say, hey, I'm going to take a step back, and it still comes on without you, because it will. That question that you asked hits very close to home because I'm a lot younger than a lot of people think. So my advice would be to definitely do your research first. A lot of activism builds off of education. It doesn't have to be formal. Like, your major doesn't have to be in political science or history or none of that. But if you're like, I'm really interested in medical sociology and I want to be an advocate for this specific thing, but like you're an engineering major, that's fine. Where your heart calls you to be at, don't feel like you have to pick one or the other, because you can wear several different hats. It's those different stories and those different roles that bring the movement together. I would also say, don't let your age restrict you, because most of the movement was led by people our age. Like, Martin Luther King was a teenager when he was like doing half of the stuff that he was doing. Like, they only show the older pictures, like when they've been in the movement for decades and stuff like that. But most of your activists, especially when you're talking about the freedom riders, those were college students. Greensboro 4, college students. Like, so don't feel as if you have to have everything together, or, oh, I'm too young to be out here, I don't know enough yet. If you have the opportunity and it fits within your boundaries, take the opportunity, because your age is only a restriction if you allow it to be.
That was heavy on a lot of the movement has been spearheaded by college students.
A lot, majority of it. Like, when you dig in it, like, Martin Luther King was graduating from Morehouse and leading the civil rights movement like the next day. Like, he just, it was a like straight line from one to the other. So please do not feel like you're too young to do anything, or that you're too old to. I see a lot of older people saying that too, like, oh, I've already had my time. No, come in. We need everybody's voice needs to come together, because it's something that affects everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Thank you so much. That was such helpful advice.
of course.
All right. So we have about 4 minutes. Is there another question?
Yeah, feel free to ask us any more questions. Also, I know Iyana dropped her LinkedIn and her Instagram in the group chat. I'm in the chat box as well, but I know I have my QR code right here for my LinkedIn. So if you scan it, it should take you directly to my LinkedIn. And feel free, I try to respond pretty quickly if I'm able to, but feel free to email me or, hit me on LinkedIn or anything like that with any other additional questions or any advice on anything. Yeah, I definitely will get back to you when I can. But yeah, feel free to ask maybe another question before we close it out officially.